Welcome, Father. It's nice to talk to you. And um, I think in this talk we're going to talk about a visit that I made to you while you were at Vatopedi and I was living in Serbia. I think maybe we'll just introduce ourselves just briefly. Um, I mean, all I want to say about myself, yeah, I'm Father Michael. I'm with the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and that's enough for this video. Maybe for yourself,
Yeah, I'm Father Patrick. I'm from New Zealand originally. I was made a monk and deacon and priest in the Ecumenical Patriarchate in New Zealand under Metropolitan Amphilochus, whom we both know and remember fondly. And though I was given permission to do my PhD in England back in 2012, and since then I have, well, 2011 actually. I know it was 2011 now. I think about it. Yes, and now then I decided to end up, once I finished it in about 2015. I just decided to stay on in the UK, where I've settled down into what I call St George's Hermitage. So I basically live on my own as a hermit, and I have a little congregation which I sometimes call it a parish, but other times I just think it's a liturgy of the Hermitage being done up around the corner, so keeps a little bit monastic feeling and so quite a traditional style of service and expectations of the congregation. So.
I'm the same. I'm a monk, but I'm also serving a parish as well. So we have that unique uh, feature in common. And you and I, of course, met each other around in New Zealand around that time, of course. So you and I have known each other a very long time. And
Yes, even if we're very far away from each other at the moment. Yes, and then we met on. And I was also something about me as before I became a monk. The earlier Bishop Metropolitan Joseph had sent me to Mount Athos, to Vatopedi Monastery, where I'd spent a few months before coming back to meet the new bishop. And then later in 2009, I went back again to Mount Athos after spending a couple of years in the UK working as a teacher. But I decided to continue with the monastic life, so I went back to Vatopedi Monastery. There I spent another 10 months. I was ordained as a deacon during that time. Then I came back to New Zealand for a little while, for about 4 months. Then went back, was ordained a priest, and then came back to Mount Athos for another 8 months training before a little stint back in New Zealand before my disappearing off to do my PhD. So yes, so I think we bumped into each other during those stages at times. So yeah, my background. So you can see my background behind me is Karakalu Monastery, which is one of my favorite monasteries on the Holy Mountain.
what do you like about Karakalu?
It's quite a traditional monastery. So I like the fact that it keeps the traditions fairly strictly to a level. It's a smaller monastery. I seem to get on with the chief cook very well. And when I first visited in '97, and I sent him a book about landscape of New Zealand. He had asked, so I always wanted to go back and catch up with him. It's a smaller monastery in the sense of the total brotherhood is about 30 monks. So the services is just the right balance. I quite like the way they chant during the services. And just the overall style of the church and everything like that. It just somehow clicks with me as a place to be. It's very similar to Philadelphia, where Elder Ephraim from Arizona comes from. So it's a similar ethos and feel. Monasteries are very close to each other.
With Vatopedi, one of the characteristics there is there's a lot of international, there's Greeks, but there's also non-Greeks from all over the world at Vatopedi. So maybe Karakalu might be a little bit like that. I don't know, but I remember when I visited you at Vatopedi, a very large brotherhood, over 100 or more. Yeah, that was my experience. Very international, and that Yeah, that's quite a feature, isn't it? The international composition of Vatopedi.
Yes, yes. Even in the Greek sense, it's got quite a lot of Cypriot monks, I think. Elder Joseph Vatopedi was Cypriot, so there's a strong Cypriot connection. The Metropolitan Athanasius of Limassol is a strong friend of the monastery, so he comes to regularly visit. He's been a long friend of Elder Ephraim of Vatopedi. So there's a strong connection with Cyprus. And then in the monastery, yes, there's quite a few monks from Romania, from Georgia, a large Australian contingent. I think it's probably about 10 to 15 monks from Australia. There's 2 or 3 monks from the US, sort of Anglo-US. Then there was, what have we got? A couple from Russia. Where else am I don't know anything from Bulgaria, so I think it's a couple from France. There's had some French monks there, and that's all, and a couple of British monks, sort of. So it's an interesting mix. And thankfully for myself, a number of people who could speak the same language with the same sort of accent as I have.
Yeah. Australian is pretty close. I remember when I was walking to Vatopedi, I'd come from Zealand, and I think it was quite rainy, so at Zealand, one of the monks had given me a black rubbish bag with the arms cut out and a hole cut in the top for kind of walking in the rain, and the hill. It was quite hilly, and the path, which was kind of ancient stone path, was flooding, so our feet were getting wet. And but at some point, I fell in walking with a beautiful monk from Romania who might have been, in his later 50s or so, no English, and we weren't talking, but on arrival at Vatopedi, I kind of seen him a little bit. He had high praise for you. Maybe you know him. I don't know. I don't know his name. He had very high praise for your gentleness and your, your just, yeah, your um, I've invented a word, disponibility. I mean, you're well disposed and you're responsible. I like that combination of being well disposed but being very responsible. So but what I liked about him, um, like obviously he had the gift of tears. His eyes were just full of water all the time, and he was so sweet and so gentle and so nice. I mean, if I could have an elder like that, I would love that so much. Um, yeah, uh,
Yes.
and even now, yeah.
Oh no, I was just saying it just reminds me of one of the things I've noticed in the monasteries at Vatopedi, Caracalo, and in the monasteries of Metropolitan Athanasius and Limassol. There's this character of the monks, this gentleness, this calmness, but masculine. It's not in the femininity. It's a masculinity, but they have a real a care, a love, softness to them that is a spirit of love and compassion sort of thing. And that's very touching to see that. It really speaks, I think, of a certain grace, a certain reality of monasticism, that it brings about this sort of calm, gentle spirit. And then meeting the elders who almost in constant prayer and tears in their eyes and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very amazing to see people like this. It's unlike the sort of agitated people you got to meet around the world. It's very much a lovely, deep calmness.
Well, it's made an impression in me even after all of these years. It's so the effect of him is still imprinted on my soul. It's
It
amazing.
reminds me
Father Lynn?
too. Oh, sorry, I've just interrupted you there. No, it just reminds me too of what I often say to the very thing what you've just talked about there, about impression, is what I try to say to people is that the first thing in your spiritual life, if you want to have an effect on people, is to attain that calmness, to attain that thing through your own pious life, your own inner prayer, your own quiet living. Don't think about trying to say anything. Just concentrate on the ascetic, calm prayer life, and then you start to taste the grace of God, and then that is what brings out the inner calmness and stuff, and that really does have an impression on people. It's really quite touching. I think it's something the world just doesn't know, that deep sense of peace, and as you say, it really does make an impression.
Yeah, maybe we'll circle back to this point if you like, because it's really interesting for me how on the internet, well, it's debate, it's lecturing, it's contentious and so on. However, probably what doesn't come across is the people that we might see on the internet who might be monks or so on. They're in this kind of speaking mode, whereas in reality, in face-to-face contact, it's more that personable spiritual balance, no wasting time on things. So maybe we'll circle back to that later, like when we talk about like yourself. You know, you're a lecturer with in Cambridge, the Orthodox Institute of. I don't know. You'll have to tell me. IOCS Institute.
Institute for Orthodox Christian Studies. Yes.
Yeah. So this is a unique unique thing. When I first met you, Father, this was always your goal was to be able to lecture, teach, impart this, you know, the theological uh, that kind of thing. And I'm so pleased for you that uh, you've achieved what you were aiming for, and you know, by the grace of God, I'm very, very happy for
as
you.
God wills and helps. He's kept me pretty quiet space for it, though. I just do sort of online tutoring, and so I've been kept away from too much upfront lecturing, which is probably a good thing for my ego to just be a bit quieter. But I have always had for a stronger desire towards the teaching, which is where I moved towards more being a priest and for preaching and thing, which is where I saw myself rather than a quieter monk, which is one reason I tend to be not so much in a major monastery, as I tend to get a little frustrated when I can't share things. So that's why I've ended up a bit more, which is something I knew from fairly early on, back about 2003. I was going to go to a monastery, and I just realized my heart really to be a priest, and it just happened to be an unmarried priest. With a monastic connection. The only reason I went to Mount Athos because I wanted to have a monastic experience. I wanted to taste the life, so I knew it to sort of taste the prayer. And I think that was utterly invaluable that I spent that much time. And the monastery was so gracious enough to have me here, a little country kid from New Zealand, turning up into these 1,000-year-old monasteries, Greek monasteries out of the middle of nowhere, and being let to eventually serve in the altar with all these abbots and bishops, holy abbots and bishops, and carry their sacred relics of things around it. It was just amazing. But yeah, I felt more that my place was as a priest, and I'm happy with in that sense of being able to be the pastor as God helps in that way.
When I visited you at Vatopedi, you're a deacon, so you're a monk deacon, you're a higher deacon. And I remember you serving your diaconal responsibilities so beautifully in the services, and I remember you had explained to me that at the end of the Orthodos, the morning prayer, then it's time for all of the deacons and all the priests to gather together and be told which chapel you're going to go to, which chapel you're going to go to. So, with the very huge numbers there, like 400 people present or more, as well as the main liturgy and service in the Catholicon, the main church. There were all of these little side chapels everywhere that would simultaneously. So I think I joined you in some of the other side chapels, which was very nice. And it was nice to, I liked getting away from the hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the good things about Vatopedi, and one of the advantages of doing effectively my training there and serving is that they did split out during the weekdays or non-feast days. They split out into multiple chapels, and so it gave me much better space to serve and mumble over my Greek, which I had to try to learn and things like that. But it was much quieter when you've only got some of the small ones. You only got 5 or 6 other monks there. It's quite a lovely service. It's done a bit more brisk space. It's not the great glory of the services in the Catholicon, but it's a very beautiful atmosphere when it's just done nice and quietly. Then it's a much better place to learn. And it meant I could serve every day. And the Catholicon was very difficult to do all the services. My Greek wasn't quite up to doing much more than just the odd cameo appearance here and there during the service. But I do remember my first service after ordination, I was thrown into the deep end. I think there was something like 4 bishops, 20 priests, and 6 deacons there at that time, and trying to run around the altar with pointy things, trying not to stab priests in the back, etc. Trying not to stand on ordarions and stalls sort of on the ground and tripping over everything. And being at the right place, and you have to go and get your hat on and put the hat off and stick it off. All the joys of the thing. It looks all fantastic from outside, but the poor monks are.
The tricky thing, like I was a deacon just briefly, but the stall, you have to cross it, you have to do it the other way, and you have no time to rearrange yourself, and it's a lot of pressure with the deacons are so busy. It's such a lot of pressure.
It's good though. It takes a lot of the pressure off the priests, who can just concentrate on the prayers. So I really do like having a deacon if at all possible. Even if it's a little busier, he can run around doing all the physical stuff like sensing things and going off to that and do the litanies. I can just concentrate on the prayer. It is much better as a priest having the deacons. But yeah, no, it was probably my best time actually being a deacon. That was some ways it was. And my spiritual life was at a good height. It's just been when you become a presbyter, all sorts of temptations and trials come upon you. But yeah, being a deacon was quite a good experience. So I enjoyed that time. Yes.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So are deacons kind of, they don't get a lot of the pressure that priests get, or something? Is that what happens? Or
well, in my case, I seem to have a much happier time in spiritual life. I was a bit more cloud 9 spiritually as a deacon. But yes, after becoming a presbyter, it's sort of more temptations and trials come flying thick and fast in my direction, sort of thing. So, but yeah, as a deacon was good. And just being able to participate in the holy altar, as I say, all these saintly bishops and priests and abbots and stuff like that. It was quite amazing experience.
My visit to you coincided, I think, with the renovation of that chapel with the frescoes of St. Gregory Palamas, and I think I was gifted an icon of St. Gregory Palamas, and I think there. Anyway, maybe you can fill me in with some more details about that chapel, because all I know is that yes, some money was made available. I think the British royal family might have been involved. I think Prince Charles might have been involved at that time. But that icon that I was gifted, taken from the altar area of that chapel of St. Gregory Palamas, was painted contemporaneously with his life, from what I understand, or that chapel dates from. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. So I think that is it the red chapel up in the corner of the monastery? Yes. So that's actually to the Holy Unmercenaries, and Aguirre is a tribulation of that monastery, and I think it's a Serbian built chapel. However, yes, it is contemporaneous with St. Gregory Palamas, and they've got that famous icon with him in there next to St. John Chrysostom, and he's called the New Chrysostom. Yes,
Ah,
when I was last visited a couple of months ago, there I went in and took a couple more photos of it. I very much loved that and venerated the icon. It's in the vestry site. So the chapels have three apses as such. You have the central one where the altar is, and the left-hand side you have the preparation altar, and then the right-hand side is sort of the vestry place where they store incense, etc. And that's where they've got that. So yes, so Gregory Palamas is on the right-hand side, and then St John Chrysostom is sort of facing them across the left side in the walls of the asp. It's fantastic to be there. I just really enjoy it. And there's another place. There's a tree where he went to pray. So I've been up to there. And then they've built a new chapel outside the monastery to dedicate it to him, where they've built it in a very old style. The monastery loves sort of looking at historical things. And so the iconostasis has gone back to marble. And it's actually only very recent that iconostasis have been filled with icons. Before that, they were more like a Western root screen, with a low wall and pillars and the top, and there's some icons on the top and icons in the screen that you could actually see through it, other than the curtains sort of behind it. And they've retaken some of the icons off a chapel of St. Nicholas on the right-hand side of a church to get that ancient feel. So, but they rebuilt this one in this style, so it's very nice to see. The abbot has quite a lot of sense of history there. And one of the things just to sidetrack for a moment, if I may, that one of the things I discovered when I was there, they let me into a manuscript library, which was wonderful. And so I got into all these 14th century manuscripts, 12th century scrolls of the liturgy. And so I've adapted my liturgical practice according to the 14th century manuscripts. And then to my great delight or interest, just me thinking this is maybe I'm a bit odd and shouldn't be doing this, but I loved it for the history, and it actually went the Greek style merged much better with the Russian style. And I wanted to sort of think, if we have an English style, we should start from a common root from both styles, and which shows a good liturgical sense of the ritual. And but yeah, the monks on the Vatopedi did a much deeper study than myself, and they actually do both much the same things I do. They do the 14th century style in the Vatopedi Monastery now liturgically. And so for the Greeks, they sit in the synthronon, for example, which is not a standard Greek practice, but the Russians do that. But they go up to the synthronon, and there's other few little tweaks where they share communion. So that when the chief celebrant, if there's two priests serving, the second will give it to the first in his palm. So each person receives communion, and then the chief priest will give it back to the other one. Then they both partake. Then they swap the chalice, and then the two priests will commune everybody else. So that's the ancient style, and I really like that, and the sense that everybody receives from it. So yes, no, that was really fascinating to see that, and I don't know why Abbott let me, but anyway, it's great to go into the manuscript library and reading all these 14th century manuscripts, and into the museum and stuff, which are very, very interesting to see the artifacts there. But no, as I said, the main reason is just being able to go in and see this liturgical things and be able to inform my liturgical practice on that, and see the harmony between Greek and Russian styles, and and you learn a lot. You learn quite a lot. So that was very fascinating. Anyway, sorry for the.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, maybe there's a whole topic there to kind of talk about liturgics and historically as well, and with your expertise and your research. There's probably a lot there that I mean, I'm probably not the right person to talk to, because I don't know anything, but I'm certainly happy to learn, and be very interested to hear more about that. I mean, I'd look forward to that sometime, if you were willing.
Yeah, whenever you can get me talking, I'll keep
Father, let's go back to just Vatopedi in general. Like we all, everyone sort of gets the picture. Okay, 20 large monasteries, big castle kind of things on on Mount Athos. Vatopedi is one of the large ones. And my impression when I was there was that with Vatopedi and its relation to the other ones, it's sort of something to be mindful of. So on Mount Athos, every large monastery, I think, has a relationship with the other large monasteries. They're linked formally, they're linked, but they all have their separate character. I don't know what to say, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the relationship of Vatopedi with the other monasteries, like maybe
okay.
what it was like. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. There's each, as you say, each monastery has its flavor. Each monastery has its style, which is very much the way it is. In Orthodox monasticism, it's not like Roman Catholic orders. It's very much each abbot runs a monastery in his own style, in his own way. There's quite a lot of freedom of abbots in their monasteries. It's almost like a little diocese, and you can see this, like the abbots are allowed to ordain minor clergy for their monasteries, which is normally only a bishop can do. But in the monastery, as long as they're serving in the monastery for the monastery, the abbot has a right. And when a priest wants to serve, normally the priest will bow to the bishop's throne or get a permission from the bishop. Generally, you have a standing permission, but you symbolically, it's a Greek custom is to bow to the throne of the bishop before serving. And in the monastery, you'd go to the abbot. So when I serve in the chapels as a priest, I would go to the abbot. So that's a sort of relationship which, even though he is still only a presbyter, he's not the bishop, he still has a partially a sort of episcopal function like that. So yeah, it's one important thing. So each abbot has his own way and own style. Now, what's happened, the monasticism in the 1970s was getting what's called idiorhythmic across a lot of the monasteries. So monks were just basically living in the monastery, but each doing his own thing. And they would meet for common services, but there wasn't a sort of a central abbot and a central sense of obedience. It was much more self-willed. And this is okay in an emergency sense of monasticism, but it's not the best. The monasticism is much better when it's a proper cenobitic, where there's an abbot and everyone's doing obedience to the abbot. It's just obedience is a great pathway to salvation. And self-will is very bad. so we must go to obedience. So what's happened is Elder Saint Joseph of Hesychast had a number of disciples on in the Holy Mountain, and when he passed away, a lot of the disciples moved to other monasteries. And so what you've got, I think, is 6 monasteries with his disciples. You've got Karakalo, Philotheu, Zeropotamu, Vatopedi, I think Kutlamusiu or something. I'm not quite sure, or Constantine. I'm not sure Constantinus. I remember if you get Constantinus, one named after Constantine. They were refounded with from his disciples, and there was a little bit of tension at the time, but eventually they sort of settled in. And so what you've got is those monasteries have a lot of character because they all come from Elder Joseph, Saint Joseph of Hesychast monasteries. And they tend to be, he was quite a traditional monk. So, and as you see, most of the saints are, they're quite rigorous in the traditions of the church. And they tend to be sort of strong liturgically, much stronger in a cenobitic life, very strong in the Jesus prayer, as you'll find in most monasteries. But the Jesus prayer is a big part of their monastic routine. And so, yes, so you've got that character. Then you've got some of the other ones, Iberon, Stavano Akita, Pantocrator, Xenophontus, and I think not Dionysius, Docario. Yeah, these ones are more patriarchal monasteries. So Vatopedi, Karakalo, are very strong on following out of St. Joseph the Hesychast and their identity of that monasticism. And then you've got the others more patriarchal. So they're standard monasteries, but they have a very high regard of the patriarch, that follow the patriarchal ways and things. So it brings a sort of different character to those monasteries. There's still the standard monastic life, but there's a slight sort of more ecumenical, I suppose, sort of feel to them slightly in a broader sense than the Hesychast monasteries, which are a bit more sort of focused, stricter, but they vary because each monastery has its own flavour. And then you've got Simona Petra, which is wonderful on its hill, and it's had a very saintly abbot, so it's got its own character. It has quite good relations with Vatopedi and things. So is Gregorio. Gregorio has quite a care for people with drug addicts and stuff, so they have quite a ministry which they do as well at that monastery. And then there is Reminisce, which is sort of similar to the Vatopedi Caracalo heritage. Right. So it's sort of all different schools. Then you've got the Bulgarian Monozorgrafu, which is a Bulgarian flavour, the Hilanda, which is a Serbian flavour, and then you've got Panteleimon, which is a Russian monastery. And these ones tend to sort of keep to themselves. So they'll have reactions, but they tend to, the Bulgarians will just sort of keep their little circle. Whereas some of the Greek monasteries, you're more likely to go around and concelebrate between each other, and there's sort of monasteries you're more likely to go to. But the Serbian and the Bulgarian tend to be up the north end and tend to be just sort of a bit more do their own thing. And so there's the Russian one. The Russian one is fascinating because you can see the influence of 19th century Russian Empire there, and the amount of gold on their iconostases and things is quite incredible. And there's the Skeet of Prophet Elijah, which was never actually finished, but it's a church is a lot bigger than most monastery Catholicons, and the whole iconostas is just covered in gold. The rest is unpainted. You just got this glorious golden iconostasis in front. So that's interesting. Then you've got, of course, through the 17th century, 18th century, you get a Russian influence. So you get all these high wooden iconostases being put into place, and sort of more Russian style icons. But you'll see in the back of Vatopedi, they're taking all those icons down and put back the more older Byzantine style icons. And I think for the favor, they even took away the wooden one and went back to the sort of marble iconostasis. So in those days, they're much lower, just a small marble one. The whole high thing is really quite a Russian influence. And I think there has been a slight turn away from foreign influence a little bit in the monasteries now. So Vatopedi is fairly mixed. There is a little bit of pressure from the patriarch not to get too mixed. I think they've, whether it's pure Hellenism, I'm not sure, but they have had a bit of bad experience with too much Russian influence, sort of started to changing the styles of the monasteries. So they're a little bit wary of that now. So that's a little bit interesting. And there's, of course, lots of little skeets. There's Romanian group Prodromu, which has got a Romanian flavour. It sort of keep to themselves. And across the mountains, there's lots of little hermitages and skeets, little groups of monks living in 2s or 3s. And especially if you go to Carrières, the capital, you've got a number of little monastic places around. St. Andrew's Monastery, which is huge. Again, the church is mammoth. But it's just a subsidiary skeet, as they call it, for the Vatopedi Monastery. And that's another interesting one where it was Russian style, and then the Greeks have sort of taken over, and they eventually start repainting the colours from green to red and things like this. So it's interesting how things evolve, colour schemes even. So the monasteries generally get on. There's a little bit of interesting. The Great Lavra is like the first monastery and things. So it's got its standing and stuff, and there's sometimes a little bit of friendly monastic rivalry with Vatopedi, which also calls itself the a great monastery. It's like the second ranked one. Is so they have a little bit of a friendly rivalry. But it's all good. And then in the carriers, they have a council of all the main monasteries come and meet and to make general decisions about things. Yeah.
After I left Vatopedi, I arrived at Vatopedi on your invitation, and I'm very grateful to you for that. And I stayed with you I stayed at Vatopedi for about 5 weeks, and after that I went to stay for 1 week at Skiti Marodha at Cares with Elder Makarios. Also came, just like Elder Ephraim, who went to Arizona, from Philatheo at that time. So so that was interesting, Father, that those disciples of Elder Joseph the Hazycast and the influence at Philathea did fan out, like you say, and so that's really interesting. The influence of that kind of style of spirituality, that Hazycastic one. I've just learned from you now. Yeah, that's there. But there's also, like you say, okay, there's the more patriarchal, relating to the patriarch in Constantinople, that influence there as well. I didn't know that. As an example of that Hazycastic way of, being in a Cenobitic monastery. Well, I was with you for 5 weeks. My obedience, my deaconia, however you say it, was to work in the refectory, the trapeza, and it was a style for the monks to quickly say the Jesus prayer very, very quickly all the time out loud as we worked, and so the Jesus prayer all the time. I remember working with you in the evening around a table. Vatopedi grows a lot of fruit. It's market garden, so we're cutting up the oranges, and of course we're sharing the Jesus prayer as a group together. You say 50, someone else says 50, someone else says 50, antiphonally with responses and so on. And the other thing that sticks in my mind from my visit with you was that at that time, it just so happened, okay, we're going to elevate a couple of monks to the great schema, and to take their name. And it was interesting to me that, okay, they did that. They took a new name, many years to them. But they kept their obediences. Nothing sort of changed in their life. They didn't, float away to be hermits mysteriously. But it really showed to me how in a large monastery, the interior silence, you keep that inside yourself while you're just so busy doing your work all over the place. Uh, uh, that was really interesting.
Well, I think one of the things about it, when it comes to Jesus prayer, some people imagine you sort of like some sort of guru in a cave just sitting there and saying the Jesus prayer in a sort of some semi-trance. But the reality is in the monasteries that they're quite busy. And so the monks are working all the time and things. And you're doing to try to say the Jesus prayer on the lips. They say it quite quickly. It's not like some sort of deep meditative, I'm saying the prayer sort of thing. It's just a very practical, just say it. Keep saying it fairly quickly. Just this sort of murmuring it away. And the main focus, like if you're listening to the abbot during when he speaks during the meals, so he tends to do his sermons, etc., during the meals, they'll read from the patristic texts. They'll read from the Philokalia or other texts, the lives of saints, etc. And then after a while, he will, towards the end of the meal, he'll give a little sermon, he'll give a little talk and explanation of the text. Sometimes he'll interrupt it a bit earlier. But the most things he focuses on is not like, when you have your prayer, make sure your thought is in here and it's some sort of high type of thing. No, it's really practical things like, monks, don't start sticking your nose in the kitchen to find out what's for lunch. Make sure you put things away. Make sure you don't get grumpy or shout, growing at somebody. It's really practical things, don't mess around, get your job on time, sort of thing. And so the monastic life, it's basically real practical things. It's not some sort of esoteric thing where they're going out and sitting in their caves and stuff. No, it's get on with your work, get up in the morning, go to church. So you basically stay there in your seat for the service, or if you're not involved with the service, go out, you have a meal, have a quick wash your face sort of thing, off to work for 4 hours, go back to the room, collapse in the heap for 3 hours, get up, go to a service again, have a meal, go to work again for another 3 hours to about 9 o'clock at night, go back to your room, do some reading, say your rule. They have a Jesus prayer rule. So you say your Jesus prayer all the time, but you have so many knots. So you go through a knots and you make a sign of a cross and with each knot, and then they do a number of prostrations. And then they basically, if they have a confession or something, they'll go at that sort of time. And by about 10:30, they collapse back into bed to get up again at 3:30 in the morning, and on it goes. So it's quite an intense cycle of work and prayer. But it works. This is the way. It's not about some sort of ego trips or, as I said, some esoteric thing. It's just practice, get up, do your work. Just it's a constant obedience, just constant sort of ascesis of just simply doing the things. There's nothing uber like special of wearing ropes around themselves or weights or doing anything super much. But the program itself is quite intense. So monastic life is a lot about just doing what your tasks, going in, doing your work, scrubbing vegetables, setting tables, or in some cases doing the accounts on the computers, or looking after the library. There's all sorts of different tasks. Later on, I was got to go through and put labels on the library books, sort of thing, and catalog them all like that, which was a bit better for my geeky sense. But there's other things of helping pilgrims. I've got lots of pilgrims. It's amazing, these monasteries. I'll just digress for a little bit here. But, you were talking about 200-300 people, yes, at feast days. But on average, say it's about 50 people a day come into the Vatopedi Monastery. They provide 2 meals a day to them when they arrive. Sometimes give them a meal, main meal in the morning before the pilgrims go off. Most stay overnight. Then they remake their beds. They have to wash the bedding, etc. Clean the toweling, clean the toilets, clean the kitchens. This is 50 people a day. And quite a bit, and sometimes a big feast, you get a couple of hundred people doing this. So the poor monks looking after the kondoriki, as they call it, or the guest house, really do have to go. And on feast days, a lot of monks get to rest on the feast days. Like a Sunday, you have a bit of a rest from your job if you're an accountant. But the kondoriki and the trapeza, we never stop eating, never stop having guests. So they just keep going. It's quite often sometimes they have to work through the services. So because you have to prepare the meal, etc. So the monks, and they'll have little speakers in there in the church services, piped into the kitchen, so that the monks can hear the services as they go. Of course, they'll go for important parts like your communion and things like this. But otherwise, it's sort of just working away, trying to get everything ready. So it's quite an intense life, but this intensity, there's just simplicity of life, just doing the obedience, just doing the habits, really starts to mold and shape the soul. And those monks who keep their focus right really start to shine. You can see it, you meet them, and the type of character you were talking about at the start. You start seeing this in a lot of monks. It is quite impressive. Occasionally, some monks are not so good at doing that. You see them get a bit grumpier and more chattery and stuff like this. But ones who keep the program, they really start to shine.
I found the refectory, the trapeza, really hard work because I was there 4 times a day and busy and so fast and set up, clean up, set up, clean up, set up, clean up, set up, clean up. At that time, you were working the Arcondaria, the pilgrim centre, the guest house, and you were busy there. I want to ask you a question. After about 5 weeks, it was a bit much for me. The work was a bit too hard for me. But do you think that if I had persevered, say, in a situation like that, I would get over that hump of finding it just too much hard work? Would that have happened, do you think?
Most novices are thrown in at the deep end like that, and obviously that deep end is better for younger men. When you're a bit older, it is a bit harder. So when you've been there for a while, they will tend, and you've shown your sort of obedience, and you've got through the sort of initial. They'll or you're starting to burn out. They'll shift you into something which is more amenable to your state of mind, strength, etc.
Right.
Never as you will, but the abbot is sensible to not keep pushing you on something which you're just simply not capable of doing. I must admit, for myself, after 2 or 3 months, I actually started getting sick in the monasteries. I was just burning out, and that was more to do with sleep. I'm not the best of sleepers, and when I was getting stressed with only having 7 hours a night, when you just simply have to keep going, and that just made me. And I'm not used to the food there as well, so I was sort of losing a little bit of weight and things like that because I wasn't so keen to just eat out. Actually, I've got very good food overall, but so especially when it's fasting, it was getting a bit difficult. So I was getting actually quite sick. So in the end, it was partly just me getting stressed by trying to keep up with the program. So I got the obedience to relax. Of course, I kept going. I actually learned something very interesting in the monastery. Actually, having had this issue, I've taught me something. Is that I got to sleep in a little bit, so I could have an extra hour of sleep in the morning and turn up to go to the liturgy for 6. So instead of trying to get to church at 4, I'd be there by about 5:30. So I could go and serve the liturgy at 6, which worked very nicely for me. I could keep that pace. Just trying to get there at 4 o'clock every morning was just. And you see some monks get very tired. But what I learned from that was very interesting that to be in the monastery, it's about union with yourself and God and union with you and the other monks. An important part of that is doing what everyone else is doing. It's being in the program. It's being part of it. And so you're going to church when everyone else is going to church. You're working when everyone else is working. You're in the meal when everyone else is in the meal. And if you stop doing that, if you keep out of a rhythm, even if you're not going for a little part of it, you start getting into a state of being more isolated. You start feeling yourself becoming detached and in sort of your own bubble. And that's really quite bad. And a lot of monks, if you start breaking out of the routine, will end up leaving because you start slowly unraveling your connection to the community. So it's really important to be part of the program, to be there with people. And even in the parish life, we should go to a church every time the church's services are there. So you feel part of it. And it really helps bind you to be physically there, to doing the things. And if you start pulling out, you start becoming more isolated. You start feeling yourself become more enclosed and separated off. And it's not a good thing. And so, I can see why when you're really at the monastery, the monks need to be able to follow the routine. Or at least be there for a few years. If they get sick, some of them do other things because of their tasks and stuff, or things are lowered down just because their health can't keep on it. So if you've been there for a while, and then often they will, but that's because you're already bound in there, so it's not so bad. But if you can't keep up with pace, it's best not to be there in some ways, because if you're not following the full program, you start feeling a bit isolated away, and that's not a healthy situation spiritually.
No, I mean, mea psyche, one mind or one soul. Just, I think it is just the absolutely the thing to do in a monastery, in a Cenobitic monastery. Have to, so that the grace can be communicated to you from people who are more experienced in abiding with grace, with your one mind. Let's get back to Vatopedi, because other interesting aspects about it that were interesting for me was because of the sheer size of it and the international composition. I remember, like, when there's a meeting, like a big meeting of the whole monastery. You and I, we were in the salon that was for the Anglophones, and someone wouldn't, be able to, interpret for us. So that was interesting, and we would be hearing the main delivery over the speakers. And when I was there, one of the speakers was our Bishop Amphilochios, who's currently back in Rhodes at the moment. So and at that stage, I was just a novice from Serbia. I wasn't part of his archdiocese at that stage. But yeah, that was interesting. Um, so
Yeah,
being in that
just a
cell,
little thing
yeah,
on that one. When he turned up at the monastery, went to greet him, and then as he's walking in, all the monks were going to, your bishop's a saint, your bishop's a saint, your bishop's a saint. So I was like, oh, really? No, I knew he was a very holy man, but yeah, it was nice to that. So yeah, when you know your bishop is, the monks on Mount Athos are saying your bishop is like a saint, then it is a good thing. So I feel extremely honored that I was ordained by him and things like that. So yeah, no, he was a very holy man. One little story, just sort of a sidetrack, which I think exemplifies his character, is when I was ordained as a deacon, we did the service, and they were doing this sort of thing outside the church, like a show or something like that. And I had to go with my host, and we're looking for a bishop. Where is he? Where is he? Oh, I can't see him anymore. Okay, I wanted to say goodbye, but oh, never mind. Anyway, we walked off to the car, and as we walked off, we looked backwards, and behind a hedge, there he was, hearing someone's confession on the side of the road. his priority was fully on the spiritual. I thought, wow, that's a real bishop. Not sitting in the middle of a crowd, but yeah, out there, it was the quality of a bishop.
yeah, that exemplifies his behaviour and character very, very, very well.
And
That's
what was the other
beautiful.
thing about that? About all those big meetings? Yes, it was really good that every week, I think once every, the abbot would gather, and then they'd have a sort of half an hour, three-quarters an hour to an hour meeting and talk with the abbot would teach. Or quite often, just recently when I was there, they'd play videos of Elder Joseph of Vatopedi, the spiritual son of Saint Joseph, who they regard as a saint now. I was there when he died, actually. It was a similar time when you were there. So I was actually there for his funeral when he smiled and the things. So, yeah, again, I was just honored to be sort of accepted as part of the brotherhood to venerate his body when he passed away. That was, yeah, it was a great honor just to be there at that time. So, but yeah, I play videos and stuff. So it's quite. Then they split up because, and I think it was something when I was there. They started to say, "Oh, poor old Father Patrick doesn't speak very much Greek," and so we got someone to start helping me. And then it sort of became more institutionalized. So they've got Romanians and Georgians and all these different groups are trying to. For all the new novices that come in, especially, and some of the younger monks, whose Greek is not developing as fast, and to pick up and be able to hear what the elder is saying. And they do it at meal times too. So they'll even sit you at meal times with a translator to help. So yeah, no, it's really a good thing. They really care of the abbot to make sure that everybody can follow the talks. And yes, no, and it's good. As I say, most of the talks are practical things of spiritual life, which is actually really helpful.
Yeah, I remember sitting at the Anglophone table in Trapeza with you as well, which was very nice. The I think let's work through our list a bit. There's so much I can keep talking to you about Vatopedi. Probably I'll just have to blurt out stuff that I remember very fondly. Um, one of the things so I'm going to do it now. Let me blurt out. Uh, you were able to find some time with me, some time for me, and where you and I could talk, and you could show me around. And at one point, you showed me around some of the grounds, and we were in the, I think, one of the outer sheds, not an important shed, and a garage shed kind of magazine thing. But yeah, like unmarked bones, the femurs, the tibias, the skulls, all of that, just piled up
Yes,
all over there, all over there.
They at that stage, that was at the cemetery chapel where they have the ossuary, I think it's called. So they keep all the bones of the monks. They bury them in the grounds for about 20 years, and then when they run out of space, they exhume the bones and then store the bones, and they separate the skulls out from the leg bones and the arm bones. They'll be scattered. And I think when you were there, they were redesigning the thing, so they had all these bones just in a big heap, sort of outside the monastery. It's quite an experience. Now they've got them all neatly arranged, and I took someone to see that when I went a couple of months ago. They're all neatly arranged, all these skulls and the trays and stuff like that, and they've got the rest of the bones, I think, put somewhere else. So yeah, that's very interesting. A good reminder of death. And there's no sort of fear of death in the graveyards, in a sense. And some of the bones are saints and stuff like that. They don't recognise all of them. Quite often, I think saintly bones are more yellowy in colour, and so yeah, it's very interesting. Apparently, the priests get crosses in their skulls and their bones. I haven't identified that, but that was something which they said. And a lot of bodies don't get rigor mortis. Is another thing that just is very soft when they pass away. It's sort of one of those sort of more miracles or things that are special to the monks on Mount Athos. But yes, no, it's a real reminder of death, and just see all the monks that have gone before and keep pressing on. Yes, and the monastery itself, just to sort of move away from that particular view of it, has quite an extensive network of buildings and garages and workshops and stuff around the monastery. It's quite a large, sort of almost like a village, and it's things. They've got workers that come and work around the monastery, that they sort of paid workers to come and help on the farms and stuff. A lot of monks. It's not like some of the medieval ones where monks just inside doing sort of writing scriptures and stuff. A lot of the monks will go and work in the fields, but they definitely get a lot of extra help. And they have fishing, so we popped in and they had a big fish factory. They were just sorting out a lot of fish. We picked up a shipment to take off somewhere else as I was being driven to Carriers. So yeah, they get monks going out. They get fishing boats. Yeah, no, it's quite. And then they've got large gardens. They started to grow kiwi fruit. Kiwi fruit has become really popular over there. I used to enjoy it when I had the New Zealand ones come in, and you could stick on these funny stickers of New Zealand. Like, hey, but then they started growing themselves there because they're such a good source of vitamin C. They do their own wines, lots of olive trees, and they're harvesting olives, making olive oil. And the interesting, different monasteries have different flavors of wine from the soil around them. It's quite interesting. I remember Veron has quite a distinctive flavor of wine, but each one has its own flavor. That's the other thing, or just a slight digression. You think of monasteries, all this asceticism, but it's quite funny, really, because you have your service from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., then you go to breakfast and you have wine with breakfast. It's like the best feeling. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's that the shot is that big and it's pretty rough. It's like paint stripper, and what I found was that just that slug kind of
that's
just
for the ouzo. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the red one, the rock gutty red one, just that tiny dose kind of fortified me for the work that came up.
Yeah. So it's not anti-alcohol or anything like that, but obviously, if the monks got drunk, Abbot would take them and take a strip of them. Yeah. So that was interesting. So there's a lot of activities. Unfortunately, there has to be clearing of some trees every now and again. And I was always a bit disturbed to hearing a chainsaw in the distance. Like, ooh, the piece. And unfortunately, like moving cars around, so I see roads on the Holy Mountain, and it's like scars in the landscape to me a little bit. The tracks are walk tracks, you can barely see them, and they're quite beautiful, and old stone paths, but the roads sort of spoil it. But that's part of life, really, that things have to keep moving between back and forward, and it does help pilgrims to get there a bit more easily, and elderly bishops to move around.
I walked from Carayas, from Daphne, from the port, over to Pantaleimon, and I didn't go by the road because up a hill, big walk. So I thought I'd walk along the coast. So I walked kind of along the coast, and it's all hilly. You can't really walk along the beach. There's no beach; it's stones. And so I walked to Pantaleimon from the port of Daphne, and I walked through the trees, and there was an extension cord, an electric extension cord, all the way. It was all the way, one big long extension cord, like linked up with other extension, all the way, just hanging on the branches, all through the tree. And like the distance might be a couple of, I don't know, kilometers, I don't know, something like that. Felt like kilometers. Um, and when I arrived, yeah, yeah, it was, yeah, carry on. Sorry,
No,
I'll
keep
stop.
going. I was just going well to your description. I hadn't seen that, but anyway.
Well, I emerged kind of on the beach at Pantaleimon because it does have a bit of a shore, and there was one Russian speak. Like I had some Serbian, I could understand a little bit of Slavic,
Yeah,
and he was with a couple of workers, and this is in the morning. Now I don't know what was going on with that monk. He might have been a novice. Something was going on with him. Um, I don't know if I should say this, give the wrong impression. So, what I'm going to say for the internet, this is one example out of tens of thousands of good examples. Here's an unusual thing. Okay, so forgive me, internet. This is not a typical picture. But anyway, he was with the workers and they were a bit coarse and they were slugging back the Ezo. And he was quite drunk by this stage and he was so and he was doing that bravado thing, like, oh, I'm not judging him, but this is just the behaviour that he was doing at that time. So, so that was a bit of a surprise to land on the beach and run into that.
yes, yes. Look,
Yeah.
the monks. The thing about Mount Athos is like there as a place of a lot of golden souls, you shining for the light of Christ. But not all monks do well, and so yeah. So one must be careful not to be scandalised at the odd monk who is a little coarse and rough and things like that. And there's some that sort of wander around monasteries, go from feast to feast for some reason to from monastery to monastery. So there's a range. So you mustn't be surprised if you got the old monk who seems a little bit over talkative or a little bit tipsy or something like this. They carry all the devils are there giving them the temptations like anybody else. And so it's not like every monk person who goes to a holy mountain automatically becomes a saint. Many of them struggle. And if you go for rails, you can become very quite dark. So this is part of the life. That's part of the reality of monastic life. And it reminds us that we need to keep our focus. We need to keep our prayer. We need to keep on top of things. If you let yourself go, yeah, it can be. And you get the odd example of what happens when that's there. And also reminds us too, the company we keep. Quite often, a lot of lay people come in and may not be the best examples of Christian life and fortitude and stuff. And occasionally, even people come onto feeds and stuff wanting to steal icons. I've had some big problems of them trying to take holy objects. So sadly, the world does come there to some extent, and we need to remember this. But also, just reminds us we have to take care to keep good company. We need to take care to keep our own faith going on, and it's not about the place. It's about what's in our hearts.
Yeah, so whoever that novice was, I hope he recovered from his fall, and I hope he remembers me, and I hope he prays for me.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing we got to remember, of course, and we should never judge because you never know that they repent and they become saints. I mean, you got Mary of Egypt, who was a very bad sinner, and she repented and became one of the greatest saints. So we must always keep them and not be condemning. It'd be to take them as an example, a warning to us, as the abbots do point these out, these stories of things. But at the same time, a classic case of this actually is I'm not sure when, but there's an icon in Vatopedi in the narthex, and it's got a blood pouring out of a slash in its cheek. And what had happened was a monk had, or maybe a Protestant, but I think it was a monk, had stabbed the icon and it bled. But then his arm went black. But eventually he repented, and now they've got an icon of him facing the icon of the Mother of God as the one who's repented, and his icon was before her, staring at her as a saint, that at the one he stabbed. So it's a sign of the miraculous power of the Mother of God and her icons there, of which there are many, but also the power of repentance and reconciliation. To repentance not only just to forgiven the sins, but to sainthood. So yeah, no, it's a great story, that one.
When I was there, it was the time to celebrate one of your icons there, of the Mother of God, who was pulling the hand of our Lord away, who was trying to stop her from praying for the pirates that were, raiding. And what impressed me, that icon's just huge, and it's all stone, and just so heavy, and just takes 10 people to lift, something like that.
Yeah, those icons are huge. A lot of them, like this, 3/4 of the size of a door. Really, a lot of these big icons. Yeah, it's just very impressive. Always, actually, when I was a deacon, it's be a deacon. I get to carry the icon and the incense and a candle in my prayer book, and I try to go upstairs with my long vestments and try not to fall over. It's like, try not to set myself on fire, try not to drop the icon, try not to fall over. The style, the things you have to do as a deacon. But it's a great honor at the same time.
The other thing I remember, as well as the icons, are the relics that all of the monasteries bring out their relics at Compline for veneration, and of course at Vatopedi, the belt of the Mother of God, of course. Maybe you can talk to us a bit about the relics.
Yes,
Vatopedi.
Yes, they've got the belt of the Mother of God. They've got a piece of the Holy Cross. A piece of the reed that for giving up the vinegar to Christ. Then they've got the skull of St. John Chrysostom, and that's quite fascinating because it's got an uncorrupted ear on it. His left ear is incorrupt, and where it's said that St. Paul the Apostle used to whisper into him his ear or speak to him to help him interpreting his letters. So we know that the commentary of St. John on the epistles of Paul is very, very accurate, because St. Paul himself guided him in how to explain his own teachings. So epistles. So that's really amazing. And then you've got the skull of St. Gregory the Theologian is there as well, another great father. There's a finger of St. John the Baptist, another great one. And there are numerous other ones of which I cannot recall. Those are the main ones. Like as a priest, one of my greatest joys of celebrating when they have the big feast days on Sunday is that during the entrance of the gifts, each priest carries in one of the relics. So when I was there recently, I got to carry the Holy Cross into things. So that was a great honor. But my personal favourite is once when I got to carry the skull of St. John Chrysostom, because I have a great love for St. John Chrysostom, and he's my great hero for his work on the scriptures and his preaching. So it's the honour to be able to carry his skull into the thing, not only venerate it, carry it. It's just like, how did I, little country kid from New Zealand, end up? But anyway.
So physically close to St. John Chrysostom.
Oh yeah. Just
one degree of separation.
And also most of the time, the relics they to keep preserve them a little bit, they put a little covers over when you're venerating them. But when you get a priest in the altar, you can actually lift those off and actually get to kiss the relics directly. So the perks of the job, let's just say. But it's just amazing just to be in that atmosphere, just surrounded by these relics of his saints, and the belt of the Mother of God, of course, and be able to venerate that. That's really miracle working. Again, the Holy Cross as well. I mean, you just go on these things. So praise God for that, and just being in that environment just connects you back to the saints. Just reminds you the living history. I mean, sometimes in the West, we're so far, especially New Zealand, for example, you're so far away from it. It seems like a dreamland, but when you're actually there among these things which have been preserved, I mean, the monastery is over 1,000 years old now, and they've just been preserved, rescued from Constantinople when it fell to first to the Latins and then to the Turks. I think the rest of the bones of St. John Chrysostom were taken by the Latins and then returned fairly recently to the Ecumenical Patriarch. So the rest of his body is in the Fanar, in St. Andrew's Church. Yeah, and I think St. Gregory Theologian, but Vatopedi has the skulls. So it's worthwhile just going to venerate the relics if you get a chance, sort of thing. And occasionally now they'll take the relics outside. So Abbot of Vatopedi, especially to Cyprus, they'll bring the belt of Mother God or the skull of St. John Chrysostom. They'll take it out so that other people can venerate as well. So that's a great blessing that they're doing with that.
The hospitality that Vatopedi showed for me, that you showed for me, and Vatopedi showed for me, was this is something people probably don't know. Monks are so hospitable. They'll do what they can for you. So one of the things they did for me, because I was a novice, as a novice I have a cell rule, I have prayers to do in the evening alone before I sleep. So they said, "Oh, you're a novice. Well, you shouldn't stay in the dormitory with a guest because you need privacy for your prayer, because the pilgrims are just going to chat and blah blah." So so your monastery gave me a nice. No, you go to that dormitory and be alone there. That room, you'll be alone there. They were very mindful to preserve my monastic formation as a novice. So,
yes,
and they just did that. I wasn't asking for anything. They just know. They know what you need.
Yes. No. Look, it's very good to hospitality, and that's one of the things where we're supposed to give hospitality is Christian virtue, and the monasteries are very good at it. And they don't ask anyone any money from anybody. They have all these guests come and they feed them. They look after their needs. It's quite often if you need, the abbot will make time to talk to some of the guests, or some of the spiritual advisors will talk to some of the guests. If you are, sometimes the guests will be allowed to come and sit with the monks at the table to listen to the thing if they've got connection to someone. So yes, no, it's a great sense, and trying to be careful and care for everybody, make sure that needs are provided. The monks often in church too, all the seats are actually given to monks. There's 120 in the church, and that basically fills up all the seats. But if any guest takes a seat, the monks just walk off and find somewhere else. The guest always has priority to the monks.
Yeah.
So and the monks get told off if they try to demand their seat. Of course, if you're slightly older as a monk, then you have a slight priority to have a seat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of another slight story of a little bit more humorous side of monastic life.
Yeah.
The monks, of course, turn up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and as I've sort of expressed, it's quite a tiring regime where you only get about 7 hours of sleep a day, sort of thing. And normally it's 2 blocks. It's like a 4 or 5 hours, and then 2 hours later on. And when I'm used to sleeping 8 hours a day, it was a bit too much. But so some monks get a bit tired, not understandable. You can see them yawning away. But there's another monk. His job is to go round and check to make sure any monks are not asleep. And there's also a story of one old monk taps another one. Wake up! He says, "Oh, wake up! I'm afraid." You hear the old story every now and again.
So for the internet, this is one example out of hundreds of thousands of normality.
Yes,
this is
up and around and keeping very focused. But look, is a real side of monasticism. It's very sweet, and you just realize they are human beings. They're not like some sort of people that are sort of zoomed in from Mars or something like that. That different monasticism is real people getting on a real love for God and working. And it's sort of like we mustn't over exalt monks as being sort of superheroes, but at the same time we mustn't, and we think that we can never do it. We can never be monks. There's a lot of sense of they try to help everybody to be a monk if you can make it. It's not easy. It's quite tough, but yeah. And it reminds me of another story about monasticism, which is it's interesting that the selection process of who gets to stay and become a novice and who doesn't is rather not always as you expect. So occasionally you will get some very enthusiastic person who's great joys thinking that they're going to become the world's greatest monk. And they go to monasteries. Every monastery says, no, there's no space. There's no space. The next day, some pilgrim turns up. And this has happened when I first visited. And the abbot says to him, oh, you should stay and be a monk. Okay. And then he just stays. So this guy turned up literally for 3-day visit to Mount Athos. The abbot said, stay as a monk. He just stayed. His father, his brother came trying to talk him back out of it. He didn't go. And he's still there today. He's a good monk. Father Ambrose is his name. He's from Australia. Yeah. So one, and then another moment, someone else comes up, oh, we're full, or something like this. The abbot has quite a big discernment. It's amazing that he can read into hearts. The vast majority is you come and you show an interest, and then they'll let you stay for a while and see how it goes. And then they'll sort of, once you sort of be there for 3 to 4, 5, 6 months, and you seem to be fairly stable, normal, etc., they might clothe you, and then you stay for probably about a year. And if you can handle it then and stable, then they usually have them as rasa for monks for a few years. And then they don't have any difference between great and small schema. They just have schema monks, which is a great schema, which I prefer. Once you take the vows, you're a monk, you're a full monk, and you're just a monk. You're not like someone who has to go off into cells like the all Russian thing where you're some sort of super monk and you go off to your hermitage. No, in the Greek practice or the Athonite practice. Now, there's a slight difference between mainland Greek. You all have distinct orders, but in Mount Athos, you'll just go straight to this great schema monk and just get on your life like any other monk. Just keep sweeping the toilets and cleaning the toilets and do other tasks while you keep saying the prayers. So, yeah. So that is an interesting part of the entry side of things. Or someone like myself, I was introduced by my bishop wanted me to go there. So for a favour from my bishop, they let me stay on there. So.
Let's talk about Father Ian, because he was very solicitous towards me and looked after me very, very well. And I think you told me he was basically the second in charge or something. He's up there as an administrator. So Father Ian from Australia was able to speak to me in English, so I was making confession to him. He was always kind of on top of my progress. So was he so solicitous towards me because I was a novice? Is that because he was so active towards me? So is that was that why he was like guiding me so well, because I was a novice? Would he do that for pilgrims?
I think it's Father Theonas is Father Ian.
All right.
Father Theonas. Yeah, he's Australian, like up that level. Yeah, I have no idea particularly why he was so good with you. As the Mother of God and guides to do that. But yeah, they do try to take care. And I think of novices, etc., but more interested. If I could see you have a genuine heart and mind for the faith, coming from places like New Zealand, where we are a rare breed, so they tend to have more compassion on us and care for us to help us through, as we're so isolated from the mainstream of things. So they want to look after us to make sure we get a good start, and maybe just for your particular needs, they could see that you had a genuine calling for being a monk, and they really want to give you a good help on to get a good footing to start with and get you underway, and not be scared off too early or anything like that. So there's lots of reasons. The abbot is very perceptive. And a lot of the abbots are, they'll see your hearts basically, and then they know what's going on. It's a sort of Mount Athos is a place of true miracles. It's a place of true. Well, it's a Pentecostal. Sometimes we used to say words of knowledge, words of wisdom, and all these sort of things. And it's like more of an ego trip. But when you get to Holy Mountain, you get it from these holy guys, and they're holy because they've done obedience for years. They've done ascesis, they've done their prostrations, they've done it. But it's not just a fasting; it's ultimately in the heart that your holiness comes. It's just a pure heart, and so they've gone through that, and then they're united with God. The Holy Spirit fills them, and it's just this natural part of being your union with God. The Holy Spirit, you share the knowledge of God, you share the wisdom of God, you share the love of God, you share the insight of God, and that's manifest through these guys. And so, just like God can read our hearts, the abbots can often read the hearts of those coming to them. So they'll work to what's best for your salvation.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm just going into thinking about pilgrims that might not be novices, but lay people as pilgrims who would be walking around the different monasteries on Mount Athos for their 3 days or for longer, if that's the blessing for them. And there's this phenomenon that you might be able to speak to us about, Father, which is how could they, like, let me put the question like this: would a pilgrim ideally be able to stay a bit longer than just the day or the 3 days, a few weeks, or to develop a relationship with, like, Father Theonas or some elder, that they could get to know each other and get something imparted of that spiritual quality, that they could both share in, because the counterfoil against it is, if the visits are just fleeting, you're here, then the afternoon you're there, then tomorrow morning you're there, then you're there, and now you have to go back to the mainland. Well, not the mainland, but you have to leave Mount Athos. In that case, it can, I think it can just get, okay, you're there for the relics, you're there for the services, good for you, well done, that's really great. But you might not be getting that personal, in-depth kind of soul to soul kind of thing. And I just before I ask you to talk, comment on this, there is that danger, which I don't know if I should say on the internet, but it can be. I had the experience sometimes. Pilgrims talk a bit too much, about worldly stuff. But this is something which is, yeah, there are probably, I think, what do you think? Some monks who are probably suffering a bit and not floating on grace too much. They kind of can seek out the pilgrims to chat and to try to be worldly. But what I found, Father, is those monks that kind of try to poach the pilgrims to talk and pass time with. What kind of gives it away a bit is that they kind of come over a little bit ultra spiritual and ultra pious and ultra, a bit over the top. So yeah, so my question is kind of about the experience of pilgrims, how that they can contact with someone with good spiritual balance and pick that up in their own soul, compared to that layer of pilgrims that are always on the move and never quite penetrate into. So yeah, so that's the question, something around that.
Yes. Well, so there's general rules for 4 days on there. Generally, one night at different monasteries, you plan yourself around and you go from place to place. And yes, who you meet, to whom you talk. There are monks who tend to be a little bit more inclined to chat to pilgrims, get told off from the abbot for doing so. If you haven't got a strong prayer life, it's quite tempting to fill the space with chatter. So, you can try to play the card of being super pious about that. So, yes. So that's okay. Since when you move around, apart from the providence of God. So in a sense, sometimes God, if there is a certain benefit to talk to God, God's providence works in strange ways. You never know whom you may meet. So a lot of times it may be that God works through each one, and if it's the right one to meet, then God will bring it about. So I've had those sort of experiences, just thinking, oh, I want to talk to someone, and the next moment they're walking past or something like that. Or recently, there was a bishop. Someone was talking to a bishop about me, and next moment I walked in and said, "Oh, hello." He's going, just random sort of thing in a sense, but no, this is the providence of God to introduce. So these things happen. Now, if it's quite often good if you've got sort of a connection on the holy mountain as well. So if some people I know, if I want to send one of my parishioners who's interested in monastic life, I'll arrange it with the monastery. And in that case, when you arrange it with a specific monastery, you can go a lot longer than the 4 days, because each monastery can give its own dia materia on its own passport to get on, and they can just do whatever time they want. So it's up to the discretion of each abbot. So you've got the general 4-day one for just wandering around, but if you got to know one of the monasteries and the abbot, with his permission, they can extend that. You can also sometimes go, and when you get to a monastery, just talk to one of the monks and say, look, I'd like to stay a little longer, etc. And they'll pass the news up, and if the abbot blesses it, you can end up staying for longer if he hasn't decided to call you to be a monk forever, as Father Ambrose I was talking about. So that's a perfect case of a pilgrim just turning up and the abbot just saying stay. Yes, so if you've got people such as myself who've got contacts on Mount Athos, they can arrange for a longer stage. You can ask there. So there's all sorts of ways. So if you want that little bit more connection, then I think one of the ways to do it is when you get to a specific monastery of interest, is to ask if you can stay a little bit longer, or ask to speak to somebody. And quite often they'll try to sort of give you an opportunity to do so. But I haven't got time for idle chatter. So if the matter is more of a serious issue, then people like Father and us will make time to have a talk with pilgrims. Sometimes when I'll be waiting to see him at the monastery, he says, "Oh, I've got a couple of pilgrims. Can I come in another time?" I say, "Oh yes, okay. I'll see him later." So yeah, I think there's a wide range of things. I think for average person, if you don't know anyone at Mount Athos or who's connected to it, just if you want to stay a little bit longer, just ask. Especially the bigger monasteries like Vatopedi is quite good. Some of the small monasteries like Pantokrator and stuff, they've only got about 10 monks, and they find that dealing with a lot of pilgrims is quite difficult. And so you need to almost arrange beforehand to stay overnight. Vatopedi, you can just generally a lot of them you actually need to arrange beforehand. You need to book in the nights. But something like Vatopedi, because it's so large, it can cope with the other guest or two. Unless you're having to turn up on a feast day when they've got 300 people and they're struggling desperately to kick monks out of their cells to line it all up with guest beds and stuff. And the monks are sleeping in chapels and things like that. So again, the hospitality of the monks will leave their cells, fill them with beds for the pilgrims, and then they go and sleep in chapels or elsewhere. So again, it shows a priority of pilgrims. So yeah, so if you know somebody that can arrange it, that's probably the best way. If you don't, just go and just ask. And one of the bigger monasteries, full of, as I said, Kalakalu. Vatopedi. You can try Kalakalu Filofeu. Simona Petra is probably a little bit more able to do that. Iveron is usually fairly flexible. We're staying a little bit extra. Maybe Dionysiu. So the slightly bigger ones, it's easier.
Mm.
But if you get the smaller ones, actually the Serbian monastery and the Bulgarian monastery are usually fairly flexible too, but they tend to have slightly less people who speak English. Vatopedi is certainly, I think, if you're just going to want to get the chance to talk with one of the priest monk or somebody who speaks English, Vatopedi is probably your best bet. They've got a much greater facilities to address that.
I had a sense like a window into another aspect of life on Mount Athos, which was at the level of Kali, or just small houses dotted around outside of the big monasteries. And how that worked was that at Skiti Maruda near Carais, they had the practice of some of the other houses or Kali around, and I don't know what they were or who they were. The Brotherhood at Skiti Maruda would, I think, go to. It's time for breakfast. It's time for the morning prayer, and we would go to their place for the liturgy and the breakfast time. And in these little Kalian houses, there are 3 monks, tiny, or up to 5 or 6, 7, something like that. And I kind of got the sense that at that level of Kali and small houses, that's a whole another world of monastic life, whereby you just live in a small group of 2, 3, 5, I don't know, small house, and outside of the big monasteries. Um, and I got the sense it's once you're kind of connected in that world, you'll be connecting with the other monks and the other people from the other Kali, the other houses around. And I guess that, like the example that the world is reading about Elder Paisios and his little places, and people going to visit someone unique like that, that would pertain to that world of Mount Athos outside of the big monastic principal, monasteries. Yeah, so maybe you can tell us some details about that aspect of life on Mount Athos at that level, Kelly.
Yes, I don't know too much about it. I spent most of the time in the bigger monasteries. So I do know that some of the bigger monasteries will have cells around the monastery. And so when I was serving there, the Elder Joseph for Vatopedi, he had a cell outside, and we would come from the monastery and do liturgies for him. So it would just be him and maybe a novice or another monk with him as sort of a cell attendant to help him as he's getting elderly. And they lived a much quieter life, is more contemplative, and that. So they usually have a little garden or things that keep them busy, etc. But yeah, it was much quieter, contemplative type thing. And in general, the monasteries are a bit wary of sending people out to these places. So if you're going on your own, you need to, especially if you're by yourself, you need to have a very strong prayer life. You need to be perfected almost in the cenobitic life. So it's not about running away from people you don't like them. It's about spending more and more time with God, and just without distraction. It's a love of people. It's showing that you know how to do obedience. You know how to love others. And you've got that obedience has become a sort of self-discipline of prayer life, of prayer, and the disciplines of a monastic way of sleeping and eating and everything. So once you've sort of ingrained that, has become your self-discipline, and then that driving love to just pray constantly, then you're ready to go out into the thing, because otherwise being alone is very dangerous. You can get all sorts of depression and things like that. Just loneliness in the world, the type of things that hit lonely people. So we're very wary of monks going out by themselves. So I'm usually there, and then the abbots, the priests will go out and do liturgies for them. Maybe sometimes even daily when they do, it's all spread out. And then the monks from those places will come to the main Catholicon for services. Yeah. And when you got carriers, you've got lots of little cells. So there's the other way. Some monks, the big cells don't quite work. They're actually better in the smaller cells. and small groups. And so some, this is better. This is actually better life.
Yeah.
And in that case, what they'll do is to get the communal experience, they'll go to and share other cells. And or they'll have a Catholicon somewhere in that, in Carriers, and they'll all come together for feast days and then disappear back to their cells.
Yeah.
There's much more close and intimate relationship in those ones as well, which is harder to form, but there's advantages and disadvantages. You have to have a bit better connection to the people. In a big monastery, if you don't quite get on with so and so, it doesn't matter. You've got other relationships which you can go, but obviously in a small one, you have to get on with each other. Otherwise, it just won't work. Which is why it's very hard to grow a monastery from scratch, because you have to get through a stage of sort of getting on with each other, and then you have a stage where you might have a clique of 2 or 3 you get on, and then adding the 4th and 5th sometimes is a new dynamic start doing, and it's quite hard to get through that. It's not really until you're out 5, 6 or 7 months it starts getting easier to start developing into a much larger monastery from there.
Right.
So, but anyway, we've got these little ones, and quite often some of the more holy ones like St. Paisius will be on their own, or just a cell attendant and things like that, because I just want to be in constant prayer. But it also means that they're slightly easier to access in the sense of pilgrims coming to see. They're harder to get to the cell, but they're not in the routine of the big monastery. It's easier to speak to them, or they've got more flexibility about meeting people, talking to people on the telephone or things like that. So all the stories of Saint Porphyrius and Saint Paisius, how they deal with pilgrims in all sorts of interesting ways and all sorts of interesting languages, etc. And then, of course, you've got some of the saints like Elder Joseph Hesychast, who are far more in the what's called the desert, I think, around the mountain itself, and there's hidden cells and things where you've got very saintly monks living up in there, but they're hidden ones. They're not the type who can cope with guests or things like that. So they're a bit more hidden away, but they are very, very holy. You might occasionally meet them, or they come out for a feast day thing. So, and then there comes sometimes you get the grumpy old monk. There's a cell, and they're of a rich jet-setting monk. Cell. So we have a variety of things, unfortunately, but they're few and far between. The vast majority are extremely holy. But again, when there's smaller cells, you be a little bit. It's probably more slower to sort of barge your way in. Either they can't quite cope with visitors, they're busy and things like that, or things like that. So one has to be a bit more respectful. Those ones, the big monasteries are used to having lots of people pour in, so that's not so much a problem. But you have to be much more respectful of the space and time of the smaller ones.
What I saw as a difference between of the experience of pilgrims who would frequently return to the large monastery and the relationship they would have with the large monastery, compared to the pilgrims who would frequently return to a small cell, is that I saw this when I was there. A pilgrim had been going to the skeet for many years. I think he might have even been a secretly tonsured. He didn't say that, but if not, he may as well have been. But at that level, that particular pilgrim was basically like another monk in that small cell, because he knew them all so well, was with the rhythm just so much, stayed there for months. Basically, he was there like a brother, an adjacent brother to that. Whereas compare that to pilgrims who would frequently return to the big monastery. No, that would be a relationship that he would have with whichever fathers were in that big monastery within that larger context of that big house, and the experience of prayer would not be that intimate small group of people. That's
you're right. No, there is a difference there, and sometimes it's spiritual children. Some like Elder Paisius has more spiritual children, and you tend to have more of a relationship in the small ones. a spiritual child to the one, and much closer. Where it's a bit harder to do that with the big monasteries because the abbot is so busy with the monks that it's much harder to have that connection. So yeah, so at times it is for some people it is better to have a bit that closer spiritual son type relationship with the monks of the smaller skeets, and that certainly helps some. Of course, it can be a danger of a little bit of that too, because familiarity can breed contempt, sort of thing. So you got to be careful not to get too familiar at the same time. So there's always a balance in these things, and keeping the right space and distance and the right form of relationship. But there's many different ways for each of our characters, each of our needs, etc. And so while the Cenobitic monasteries are very good, and the basic way, there is a need for skeets of sort of 3, 4, 5 monks. There's a need for hermits as well. Each one has a special place and advantages and benefits to the world. And as I said, some of these hidden saints, just them being in constant prayer is helping the world through that, even if I don't have any contact with anyone outside. That is still a huge help to all of us. So.
I've got a question which you might be able to confirm, because I've got a suspicion that being on Mount Athos, I don't know, it's 125 square k's, I'm not sure. But anyway, just all being concentrated in that locale, there can be a disease in monastic life. Again, internet, this is the tiny example against a whole sea of good practice, but the tiny example of something going wrong in monastic life is where an elder might get some devotees that get a bit adoring of him. It becomes like guruism and so on. Now, here's my question, Father. Is it true that being concentrated in that geographical administrative area, if anything like that was starting to happen, all of the other monastic communities, they've stopped that from happening. Whereas someone who hope it never happens, but someone might go down that track, developing a guruistic thing, might be able to do that in isolation in some far-flung corner of a parish, far from administration with no overseer. So it looks like maybe on Mount Athos there's oversight that could stop that particular disease of monastic life occurring.
Yeah, now the disease does happen there occasionally. But what happens is that the other big monasteries and stuff will go, oh, so and so, yeah, he's gone a little bit too fanatic or things like that. So there are groups on there who've sort of gone super rigorous or something like that, or and they've sort of, the other monks will go, oh, no, that they've sort of broken communion and everything like that. So you do get little odd groups there. You do get this like guru one sometimes who start internet things. So there's one monk, he had to leave the monastery because he wanted to do a lot of internet things, and he's moved off to another skeet and sort of doing this sort of more guru type thing on the internet. He's not so much a guru, but he's still having too much of a public thing on the internet. And so we do get, but you do get it to correction. So in other words, it's much easier to go and ask the opinion of other monasteries, and they know, so they know who they are, and they go, no, be careful of so and so and things like that. Whereas someone like an isolated New Zealand or in the UK, it's much harder to get that double checking of other people around, and it's sort of it's much easier for someone to sort of try to pass off as a good monastic thing because they haven't got the checks and balances. So yes, you're right, it does certainly help. And I had some questions about certain monks and stuff, and I could ask the abbot and go, oh, what about so and so and so and so? Oh, yeah, I know him. Oh, yeah. And there's another monk in sort of Greece, and I asked one priest who didn't know, but the abbot said, oh, him, no. Something like that.
Right.
Something like that. So there is a variety. It does help because I do sort of have a see who's there, and then you can very rapidly get a better opinion on this. This guru type thing is one of the great dangers which we all face, and especially being out alone is sort of thing we undergo a bit more sort of, and as soon as you start to exhibit any form of sort of holiness, people start to somehow get attracted to you as some sort of guru, and then you thank God he keeps throwing sins across our paths to remind us. I've noticed, oh, why can we? No, who am I? But it also reminds us that it's not about ourselves. It's all about God, and to be a good monk, it's all about your submitting yourself to God, and God becomes all in you. You open your heart to God being all in you through that constant prayer, and that we maintain the faith of the fathers, the faith of the apostles. Is not of ourselves. Where if we teach anything, it's just teaching what the fathers teach. It's just passing it on as a conduit in a sense. It's nothing we've done or anything like that. But yeah, there is definitely this sort of temptation you can get into as being a leader and a guru. And I think too, as I said, that I think it's important and you'll see this in the good monasteries, they are keen to obey the traditions. So they'll, as I said, they went back to the older style of the liturgy. They wanted to keep listening to fathers. If they're finding that they're moving off track, they'll sort of reform. And it's about what do the fathers say? What do the fathers say? Keeping this tradition pure. So it's not like someone is, I'm a great teacher, I've had personal experience of this and that, and I'm going to show you the truth. It's more like we've followed the fathers. Here's what experiences. Hear what the fathers say, and we can speak well of the fathers because we've experienced what they've experienced. We put it into practice. We know what it is, and what they teach is correct, and here it is for you too to do the same thing. So, and I think it's always the case. And as a priest as well, we're not teaching of ourselves. The whole mystery is that we're teaching what Christ teaches. We're just contextualizing, helping people to follow the gospel. And it's nothing of ourselves. It's not us. It's Christ as the beginning and the end of all things. And as leaders, we're just simply there to pass on the tradition which we've received.
Yeah. With that guruism, I think the internet is made for guruism, but to perpetrate guruism, because But anyway, what I was going to talk about was I just saw just a few days ago, a layman has a site where he had obviously been going to as a lay pilgrim to Mount Athos for many, 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 many years. And what I like about the footage that he takes on his phone is it's just there's the phone and it's just showing what's going on. And it was one of his clips was at the Trapeza at Pascha this year, on Pascha Day. And what was going on at the Trapeza was that the food had been served, everyone's plates were there. But all of the monks and all of the pilgrims, they were just singing all of the Torpari, the Gantaki, they were just singing all of the Paschal hymns. And it was going on for, I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes. No one's eaten. Well, some people might start to eat eventually. But that point of view camera thing just there in an informal, unpackaged presentation thing, I don't get too much on the internet of anything on the internet about Mount Athos. It's either going to be the full-on production piece from a big, media company, or some slightly more, individual with expertise and technology doing it. And again, a highly polished presentation. But I just really like this particular layman's site because just it'd be like the camera just here in my room and he's just looking at me talking to my phone or something, like a real sense of being there. So what I would like to ask you about is, when Mount Athos is on the internet, well, what about those three ways of presenting the thing? The highly polished stuff, the smaller scale polished stuff, or this just raw camera, just raw in someone's hand kind of thing? Because it's the latter that I think can actually give you a sense of just being there with these people and whatever the setting is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the monasteries allow very great slowness, people to come in and do filming for these documentaries. You don't get many of them. I remember the 60-minute crew coming there when I was there at the monastery, and they were just let in and stuff like that. And so it was interesting talking to the crew as they taking some shots and doing films. So there's a sense of that. Then there's internet presence, like you'll get Elder Ephraim of Vatopedi, who sort of puts his lectures or talks on the internet, which can be helpful. And that's appropriate, I think, for abbots of the bigger monasteries, because they have a sort of certain standing and position where that works. It's not good for that for just ordinary monks, because we are not local teachers or anything like that. We're to obedience sort of thing. So it's leave the teachers or the abbots to do that. Now, but the monasteries aren't too super keen on people taking videos and photos just randomly around the place. Obviously, no one's going to worry if you're taking a photo of a building or something like that. But if you take a film or take photos of monks, they're a bit more reluctant. So I think overall that sense of not really liking film and stuff to be taken, I think the last one you've said is going to be a much rarer, because to get something like that, the monks themselves would have to sort of take the cameras. They do take quite a few photos just behind the scenes in the services, but they usually sort of polish them up a little bit in there. So I think you'll just get the odd gem of someone who's snuck one of those things out to see, and I think that's better. Just the odd gem where someone does it. It's not because we shouldn't be encouraging anybody to do it, but if occasionally it comes out, it can take us a little gem of insight in there. Ultimately, it's much better just to go there yourself and to take the experience back with you. But so overall, I think the monks have a reluctance for being photographed, being filmed, etc. And it's not necessarily trying to be upset somebody on that. It's just for the monks themselves. It's better not to be sort of being filmed. They don't want to start becoming like movie stars and things like this. You do occasionally get see internet movies, just sort of quiet little photos are taken. Often I recognise the monk and go, "Oh, so and so."
Right.
It's like some of these people show these photos, especially with Vatopedi Monastery, with some of the monks here, and they just look like monks, and I'm going, "Oh, it's so and so." Oh, yeah, I know. So it's different.
Have I covered everything that I need to cover? Like, have I given a good picture of like my visit to you and the way of life that you had while you were there? Or has our conversation covered this experience that I've had there? Have I missed anything else?
I think we've covered quite a good chunk of it, actually. There might be something which drifts off my mind, but nothing there particularly. I think we've talked about the services and the food and the sleep and things that tangentially here and there, and the quality of the monks. Just one other little thing. One of the holy monks I've met he's now a deacon. I'm really impressed. But there's a habit too. They won't tell you from where they are. They'll just say, "I'm from Mount Athos." And this is part of dying to themselves and putting their old life away and coming to new. So quite often, don't press the monk to find out where they're going from. Most will sort of would tell you about where they're from, but the ones more careful ones will just say, "I'm from Mount Athos." There, and if you know them a bit later, they might let you know a little bit more. But and just that. Try not to talk to the monks too much. They're supposed to try to keep as quiet as possible. It's not like some Western monasteries you've got absolutely no talking. Monks are allowed to talk but minimum needs after 9 o'clock at night is a quiet time, and in the middle of the afternoon, so you have a sort of a siesta sleep. It's also between about 1 and 4. There's also a quiet time there where you have to be sort of quiet around the monasteries. Depend on the monastery. Most monasteries will have that sort of rule as afternoon siesta. Karakalo, for example, actually went to a liturgy and then have a break straight after the liturgy. They rest for a couple of more hours after the liturgy and then get up and just go straight through until the evening, go to bed, service, sleep again for a couple of hours, and then go back into their daily routine. So it's just a bit of a variety in that one. Yes, of this, at the guest house, the monks will provide your needs, etc. Some will quietly, and then there'll be some monks who will be available for a bit more talking, things like that. That's your obedience to help people out and help find things around. Then you get someone, you bump into someone like myself who goes, "Oh, hello, someone from New Zealand. Let's show you around." Which is always a great joy to see someone else from New Zealand turning up to the monastery. We don't have many of us.
No.
Yeah. So yes, did you meet Father Sava?
From Australia, the Australian one. It's Greek Australian.
One in Serbia. Father Savas.
The priest.
He was just a monk. He was quite unwell. He had lots of illnesses. I see, before your time.
Maybe before my time.
Oh, he's probably most famous.
Yes, sorry, yeah, no. Yeah, sorry, Father. No, yeah. So it was Father Savas that invited me to go to Serbia to be a monk in his monastery here.
Yeah. So I thought you might have known him. He's a fantastic quality of New Zealand monasticism, where he had every sickness in the book. He should have been dead 20 years before he passed away. But he went off to be a monk. They looked after him. They basically just let him do what he wanted, because he was so ill that he didn't need any more excuses after that. And I think his funerals attended by about a few bishops and a great number of priests, and etc. He was very much loved. He was a very gentle spirit, lovely man. A great monk. I enjoyed driving him around when I was in New Zealand and visiting his family home, etc. So it's pity I didn't get to see him in Serbia. So, yes, there's a few. And Father Ambrose is still ticking along.
Yeah.
Again, he keeps telling me he should have been dead about 20 years ago. Like, he still ticks along. So yeah, so there's about, I think that, I mean, there was Aidan Hart, who was is an iconographer now. Unfortunately, he got married, but he was a monk for a while in England. He was close to the Vieira Monastery, where he did some carving and stuff. So yes, there's a few of us floating. I don't know if there's any more New Zealand monks now in the monastery at Levin, or.
I think our dear Father Meleti is very busy with the mission in the Pacific Islands, so I think that's a big obedience that he is bearing there. Just going back to Father Savas, a New Zealander who was in Serbia at the monastery where I was, he was very helpful to me while I was there, and. Yeah, so he was delightful, and the Serbs loved him so much. He was basically bedridden. He could get up and move around, come to church a bit, but it was hard for him to do that. So the Brotherhood were always locking into his room, passing time with him in his room, and his room was his cell was on the ground floor, obviously, hard for him to get upstairs. But he had bookshelves on every single wall, but the books were 2 books thick. Like there was a layer of books behind those books, and so he was very well read, always buying books. And he's interred in the cemetery at that monastery, which I think basically he started with the current Patriarch of Serbia, Porfiria. So he's kind of what our Father Savas is kind of there as a kind of founder of that brotherhood. And anyway, he's interred in the cemetery, and it's like a place of pilgrimage. well, for me it was, to go and reverence him at his, in his grave.
Oh
So
wow! Yes, I
yeah.
hope maybe I'll get there one day to do that. So yeah, it's just amazing how someone whom I knew, sort of thing, a little again another country kid basically from New Zealand, ends up being highly honoured in Serbia. So yes, for those New Zealanders watching, there's always a way forward, and it's just a totally different world getting involved in the Orthodox Church and experiences there. If you plug on in the way of a faith, and things God helps us along through it. Yes.
Um, when I was at that monastery with Father Savas at his monastery, the under their bishop, they followed the Athonite way of doing things. So I just slotted straight into Vatopedi because it was exactly the same as
Yeah.
what we were doing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, I'm a
yeah.
big fan of just the Vatopedi. Vatopedi is very much a rule-based monastery. So it's very much the clock-based. This is the time we do the service. They do all the services, do them all correctly, sort of things. They're very careful to do that. You get the full hours, you get all the full service, which is quite a load sort of thing. But nevertheless, it's nice as a regular rule type. Breakfast is such and such. If the priest is a bit slow in the service, hurry up! You've got to get to breakfast at this time. So, and I fitted that. So that's one style of monastery which I got used to. The Jesus prayer rule and everything there, which they'll follow from these other monasteries in Serbia. Yeah, no, I very much am of that mind. Our blessed Bishop Metropolitan Amphilochius is a slightly different style, is much more free flowing, led by the spirit and things. I must admit, as a New Zealand's clock wearer, I found it much harder to cope with. I wasn't very good at it. I liked the routine of the time. So, but each has its place, each has its benefit in a sense. And our Bishop Amphilochius could really spend more time in personal needs and stuff with those who was with and really help address that. He wasn't pushed by the clock. He would sort each thing out or spend the time needed for each situation, which has its own blessings and things like that. So yeah, it's just interesting the different ways of monastic life I've experienced. But like yourself, I think I got trained as sort of in the more clockwork way of Vatopedi, and that sort of suits me. Though of course now my own little thing, I have to keep my own little clock.
Yes, yeah. The Serbs were very just very stable, very solid. Just do it without variation. Yeah. Just keep it steady and just solid.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the big parts of monastic life. I mean, we talk about chastity and obedience and poverty, but one of the biggest parts of monastic life, and most important part, just as like actually normal life, is stability, and it just being stable, just that steady going through the things. And a lot of our spiritual life is just that steady routine. Get up every morning, say your prayers. When you have a meal, say grace. Just that constant go to church on Sunday. It's so important to have this constant, steady routine in our lives. There's not too much. Something we can manage to do constantly, but that gives us great stability in our being, etc. To build on. There's no point booming and busting and going, hey, I'll do all those prayers and stuff, and then burning out after a few weeks. People tend to give up like that. So I always think this idea of stability and stability in your life. It's so difficult in the modern world. I'm obviously I'm very thankful to God. I finally, in the last few years, actually settled myself a little bit more, but we tend to move around, to go around in circles. It's very bad for your spiritual life, the stability. And so both in the sense of just staying in the same place and then having a steady routine. And these are very good things for our spiritual life. And you can see that, as you say, in that monastery. That's just what they do.
When I was a novice in Serbia and I had that stability, I also had the thing that maybe you had in Greece was that, well, I didn't speak Serbian, so I had that. It was really good because I could just focus on the prayer without anyone chatting to me all the time. So it was really great.
I wasn't
But
quite
to
so
say,
lucky in Vatopedi because there's too many people that could speak English.
right, yeah, yeah, they zero in on you to practice their English, don't they? They want to, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, Father, shall we bring this start to bring this to a close, and we can always come back to anything here and pick up other threads in the future if you wish.
Yes, yes,
And
indeed.
yeah, so thank you so much, Father, for a delightful chat and reminiscences
Thank
over
you for
our
talking. Yes,
time.
yes, indeed. Of the Lord, it's lovely to be able to talk with you a bit more about these things and reconnect to my homeland. And
Yeah,
yeah, to see that you're keeping well and to mutually encourage ourselves to keep plugging away and with remembrance of those things which we've experienced. I think it's always good to sometimes touch back and say, "Oh yes, that's right. I remember that," um, and the depth of the holiness we've seen in these monks of pressing on and continuing with the prayer, keeping that humble stability. Yes, and so it's good to remind ourselves of these things.
yeah. I mean, and so Father, by your prayers, pray for me, and
And your prayers,
if you're willing, I'd look forward to talking to you in the future. And
thank
yeah,
you,
thank you. Your blessing, Father. Thank you.
of the Lord. Your blessing, of Logitech.
Glory
Okay.
to God. Thank you, Father. Right.